Ukraine's defense forces repelled 36 attacks by Russian invaders in the Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka areas on Tuesday, April 26. According to Ukrinform, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said this in its evening update posted to Facebook. According to the General Staff, Russian troops are concentrating their main efforts on conducting offensive operations in the said areas. The fiercest fighting continues for Bakhmut and Marinka in the Donetsk region. Throughout the day, Ukrainian combat aircraft carried out 5 strikes on Russian troops and equipment concentration areas and 1 strike on the enemy's air defense system. Ukrainian rocket forces and artillery struck an anti-aircraft missile system, an enemy troop and equipment concentration area, and a radar station of the Russian army. The invaders launched a missile strike in the city of Kupiansk, Kharkiv region. At other locations, Russian troops carried out 6 airstrikes and more than 10 attacks using multiple launch rocket systems. In the temporarily occupied and captured territories of Ukraine, Russian invaders continue to use children's educational institutions for their own purposes, setting up military facilities there and covering themselves with a human shield of children and teaching staff. In particular, in Urziv, Mariupol district, Donetsk region, about 200 mobilized Russian soldiers are stationed in a children's camp. According to the General Staff, the invaders continue to loot in Ukraine. In Kardashinka, Skadovsk district, Kherson region, Russian soldiers search houses at night, stealing household appliances and cars from civilians. Ukraine's armed forces repel over 40 Russian attacks, General Staff report. The Ukrainian armed forces repelled 43 Russian attacks on 3 fronts on the 24th of April. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 25th of April. Quote, over the past day, the enemy launched 6 missile and 62 air strikes, and carried out 70 attacks using multiple launch rocket systems (MLRS). The probability of further missile and air strikes throughout Ukraine remains high. The enemy is focusing its main efforts on conducting offensive actions on the Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts. Units from the defense forces of Ukraine repelled 43 enemy attacks on the specified areas of the front during the past day. The fiercest fighting is taking place for Bakhmut and Marinka. Details: on the Volyn and Polishcha fronts, the operational situation remains unchanged. There are no indications of Russian offensive groups forming in the area. On the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts, Russian forces continue to keep a certain number of troops in the areas of Bryansk, Kursk and Belgorod oblasts bordering Ukraine. Over the past day, the Russians fired at the settlements of Kliasy and Remyok in Chernihiv Oblast, Novovasiliivka, Kucherivka, Shalyhine, Stukalivka, Iskryskivshchina, Volfin, Moritsia and Popivka in Sumy Oblast, Anoka, Mali Prokhody, Streleka, Neskuchny, Hatish, Budarki and Chuhunivka in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, the Russians continued to take measures to fortify positions in certain areas. The settlements of Topoly, Kamyanka, Krasny Persh, Fyholivka, Novomlinsk, Vorokna, Zapadna, Kindrashivka, Mashutivka and Kyslivka in Kharkiv Oblast and Novosilivsky in Luhansk Oblast came under Russian artillery and mortar fire. On the Lyman front, Russian forces did not conduct any offensive operations yesterday. The settlements of Makivka, Nevsky, Dubrova and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast and Torsky, Verkhnekamiansk, Spern and Parayansk in Donetsk Oblast came under artillery fire. On the Bakhmut front, Russian forces continue to conduct offensive actions. Heavy fighting continues for the city of Bakhmut. During the day, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near the settlements of Novomarkov and Kromov. The settlements of Vashukivka, Orikovo-Vasilivka, Markov, Hurahorivka, Kromov, Bakhmut, Ivanovsky, Chasiv Yar, Stupochky, Pivnikny and New York in Donetsk Oblast came under Russian fire. On the Avdiivka front, Russian forces conducted offensive operations in the vicinity of Novokulinov, Stepo, Severn and Pervomaysk in Donetsk Oblast. They also shelled the settlements, in particular Novokulinov, Avdiivka, Severn, Tenenk, Lastochkin, Pervomaysk, Karlivka and Nevelsky in Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, over the course of the day, our defenders repelled numerous Russian attacks in the vicinity of Marinka as well as in the area of Novomykhailivka, Donetsk Oblast. The settlements of Krasnohorivka, Hostre, Heorhivka, Marinka, Pobeda, Novomykhailivka and Pereskoviivka in Donetsk Oblast came under Russian fire. On the Shakhtarsk front, Russian forces did not conduct any offensive actions over the past day but attacked Vuhledar, Prekostivka, Velika Novosilka and Komer in Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces continue to conduct defensive actions on the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts. Russian forces attacked the settlements near the contact line, including Novosilka and Novopil in Donetsk Oblast, Olhaivsky, Malinivka, Chervon, Huliaipilsky, Charivny and Orikhiv in Zaporizhia Oblast, and Ivanivka and Antonivka in Kherson Oblast and the city of Kherson. Over the past day, the Ukrainian Air Force carried out 9 strikes on clusters of Russian personnel and military equipment, as well as 3 strikes on multiple launch rocket systems positions. Ukrainian defenders shot down 10 Russian reconnaissance UAVs of various types. In addition, rocket forces and artillery units hit a multiple launch rocket system and 2 Russian electronic warfare stations. Russia is still losing 500 soldiers a day in Ukraine even after reducing its casualties by 30%, UK intel says. Russia's daily casualty figures have fallen by around 30%, as it moves to a more defensive posture, but it's still likely losing more than 500 soldiers a day in Ukraine, according to new UK intelligence. The UK Ministry of Defence said in an intelligence update on Tuesday that Russia's daily average casualty rate likely fell by around 30% in April, compared to March figures. In March, the country was losing an estimated 776 soldiers a day, which dropped to 568 in April, it said. Russia does not release its own casualty figures, but the UK MOD pointed to figures released by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The MOD noted that Russia suffered exceptionally heavy casualties between January and March, at a time when it launched its latest offensive in a bid to seize more Ukrainian territory. But Russia failed to make any significant gains during its campaign, despite suffering heavy losses of equipment and personnel. U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley told Politico in late February that around 1,200 soldiers had recently been killed in a single day of fighting in the eastern city of Bakhmut, one of the key battlegrounds in the war. Russia's slowing losses are explained by it moving to a more defensive position ahead of Ukraine's expected counteroffensive efforts, the UK MOD said. Ukraine is expected to launch its own counteroffensive soon, aided by new weapons from its allies. Russia's losses have highly likely reduced as their attempted winter offensive has failed to achieve its objectives, and Russian forces are now focused on preparing for anticipated Ukrainian offensive operations, the MOD said.